Steel gray waves hid the Predator's approach, but the radar saw what the eye could not. 07:14 a.m., July 19, 2025. A Russian destroyer broke from the pack, surging past 28 knots, its bow slicing straight for the USS Thomas Hudner.
And Thomas Hudner won the Congressional Medal of Honor on April 13th, 1951. He's from Massachusetts.
Above, thunder. 4 Su-30 strike fighters clawed into the sky, each armed with Mach 3 missiles built to tear open steel. Below, the ocean betrayed another secret, the heavy heartbeat of a Kilo-class submarine crawling toward the formation. And then, the signal no captain ever wants to hear. Russian fire control radar, locked, on the USS Gerald R. Ford, America's crown jewel, a floating city of war. If you were in command, would you hold your fire or strike first? 07:34 a.m. The order cracked through the Combat Information Center like thunder. Launch the air wing, now! Above deck, chaos ignited. Controlled chaos. Steam roared from catapults. Yellow shirts carved the air with sharp, practiced cuts. The first Super Hornet lunged forward. 47 seconds later, another, then another, then another. 4 Hornets from the fighting checkmates tore into the morning sky, each bristling with AMRAAMs, Sidewinders, JDAMs. Not a strike run, not yet. A show of teeth, for every Russian eye watching. High above, a Hawkeye circled at 25,000 feet. Its radar painted an invisible web across 6 million cubic miles of sky. Every blip, every fast mover, every hostile sweep, all fused into a single battle picture. And that picture was filling fast. Then the Growlers arrived. 2 EA-18Gs slid into the battle space, jamming pods blazing. Russian scopes fractured instantly. 1 fighter became 5, then 10, then nothing. Just ghosts in a storm of false returns. The Su-30s had no AESA radars, no real-time links. They were blind, fighting like their fathers had, on shouted commands, on instinct. The Hornets, by contrast, were predators in the dark. They could scan 80 contacts, lock 20, kill 6, at once, and share it all across Link 16. The Russians were still sweeping with searchlights. The Americans had already mapped the night, and the storm had only just begun. 07:21 a.m. Engines tore through the haze. 4 Russian Su-30s ripped off the runway at Millennia Air Base, climbing hard into the Arctic morning. Each carried KH-31 missiles, fast, brutal, almost impossible to outrun. Their course was deliberate, straight for the 25-mile defensive ring of the USS Gerald R. Ford. On the carrier's Combat Information Center screens, the dots sharpened. This was no exercise. It was a deliberate probe, a hand reaching for the trigger. Minutes later, the tension snapped tighter. The destroyer Levchenko swung her bow, her fire control radar locking directly onto the Ford. Not a sweep, not a drift, a cold, unwavering stare. At the same moment, sonar aboard the USS Thomas Hudner whispered another danger. A Kilo-class submarine, 28,000 yards, crawling at 3 knots. Its engine so loud it was practically announcing its presence. The chessboard was set, air above, steel on the surface, a predator lurking below. But the Russians were not aligned. The jets raced ahead. The submarine lagged. The destroyer's radar felt like bluff more than coordination. Even so, the message was unmistakable. Box in the carrier. Force the Americans to move. Then the scream of engines. The Su-30s dropped low, just 200 feet above the waves, ripping over the Thomas Hudner. Metal vibrated. Deck plates rattled. Sailors looked up as shadows tore across their ship. They call it buzzing the deck. A dare, a taunt, a warning. At that altitude, 1 missile launch would leave seconds, only seconds, for survival. And yet, no shot came. The Americans held the line. No panic, no rash moves. Every Hornet sat primed, every radar tracked, every missile battery watched. The response was silent but absolute. We see you, we're ready, but you will make the first mistake. So let me ask, if you were standing on that deck, would you hold your fire or strike first? 07:34 a.m. The order shattered the Combat Information Center. Launch the air wing, now! Above deck, the storm broke loose. Steam howled from catapults. Yellow shirts carved signals through the air. The first Super Hornet slammed forward and clawed into the sky. 47 seconds later, another followed. Then another. Then another. 4 Hornets from VFA 211 rose into the Arctic dawn, wings loaded with AMRAAMs, Sidewinders, JDAMs. Not a strike run. Not yet. It was a message written in steel, clear to every Russian pilot watching. High overhead, A Hawkeye circled at 25,000 feet. Its radar cast an invisible web, sweeping millions of cubic miles of sky. Every contact, every pulse, every flicker of electronic noise, all fused into one picture, and that picture was filling fast. Then came the Growlers. 2 EA-18Gs slid into the battle space, jammers blazing. Russian screens fractured instantly. One contact became 5, then 10, then nothing. Phantom echoes swarmed their scopes, a storm of illusions. The Su-30s had no modern radars, no live data links. They were blind, fighting on shouted commands and instinct alone. The Hornets, by contrast, moved with machine precision, a networked predator.
Between this aircraft and the one that's on the other side this is what the future is going to look like. And you can see on the top, you can see those conformal fuel.
They could scan 80 targets, lock 20, eliminate 6 at once, all while sharing it seamlessly across Link 16. The Russians swept the skies like men with flashlights. The Americans already held the blueprint, every piece, every move, and the game had only just begun. 07:41 a.m. A Russian fighter strayed too far. It cut across the edge of the American kill zone, just inside the invisible line where hesitation ends and missiles fly. One Super Hornet tilted, rolling slightly. Its radar snapped into lock. In the cockpit, the AM-120 indicators glowed red, armed, hot, one flick of a switch away from launch. And yet, the trigger stayed cold. Because the deadliest duel wasn't above the waves, it was below them. Far under the rolling gray, a Virginia-class attack submarine slid like a shadow, silent, patient. She had stalked the Russians for over a week, drifting through the dark waters without a whisper. Now she was in perfect position, just 6 nautical miles from a Russian destroyer, keeping an ear fixed on a lumbering Kilo-class submarine that thought itself hidden. Every turn of its propeller, every shift in ballast, every scrape of metal, logged, cataloged, matched. The Americans knew the Kilo better than its own crew did. If war broke out now, the Kilo would not survive 15 seconds. The destroyer wouldn't last 60. It would be over before the Russian sailors even understood they had been attacked. But still, no order came. Not yet. This was not about destruction. This was about pressure. A message written in silence, steel and sonar. Above, Russian pilots strained against the horizon, searching for enemies they could not see. Below, their navy was already outmaneuvered in waters they believed were theirs. Air, surface, subsurface. Every domain stacked against them, and the last shield they trusted was about to collapse. If you were the commander of that submarine, would you fire first or hold the silence? 07:46 a.m. Sometimes recklessness makes more noise than any afterburner. And on the Barents Sea, it arrived screaming at treetop level, painted in the shape of a Russian Su-30. It didn't keep its distance. It didn't play safe. It broke formation, diving straight into the path of a patrolling Hornet. The maneuver had a name: the Thump. A close, aggressive pass designed to unnerve, to intimidate, to dare the enemy to flinch. But this wasn't an air show. The American's visor showed nothing but calm. A graduate of the Navy's most brutal dogfighting course, he rolled hard, inverted, and carved into a 6.5 G turn that would have blacked out a rookie. 2.7 seconds later, the Russian fighter filled his crosshairs. Helmet-mounted display lit green, missile tones steady. Twin afterburners glared like welding arcs across the clouds. The AIM-9X Sidewinder was ready, one squeeze from turning the sky into fire. But discipline held. No missile left the rail, not yet. 28,000 yards away, a different danger rose. A snorkel mast, barely breaking the waves. Just a breath of diesel air. But for American sonar, it was enough. Contact confirmed. Probable type 877. Depth, 118 feet. Course, 147. Speed, 3 knots. The Kilo had no idea it had been shadowed for over an hour. One order, and the USS Thomas Hudner would answer instantly. A RUM-139C VLAS rock clearing its launcher in a flash. A torpedo plunging into the sea. 14 seconds to impact. And yet, silence. No order, no strike. The ocean kept its secrets. For now. 07:49 a.m. The Russian destroyer. Admiral Levchenko crossed a line everyone at sea knew by heart, but rarely dared approach. Her frigate MA radar stopped its casual sweep. The beam froze, narrowed, and locked directly onto the USS Gerald R forward. This wasn't random targeting drift. It was a hunter's gaze. The lock was so precise, the Ford's systems tagged it instantly as fire control quality. Inside the carrier's Combat Direction Center, red strobes lit the walls. Operators called out ranges, azimuth, and bearing in clipped voices. The air was electric, tight enough to hear a pen drop over the hum of consoles, but the standing order held: do not fire unless fired upon. No one reached for the trigger. Instead, every ship in the carrier strike group shifted in perfect silence. The Aegis arrays aboard USS Ramage and USS McFall swung to face the threat. Launch cells updated firing solutions. SM-6 interceptors, SM-2 standards, and quad-packed ESSMs all keyed in on the Levchenko. On the carrier's deck, close-in weapons, phalanx CIWS, spun up, tracking arcs invisible to the naked eye. From the Russian bridge, the beam stayed locked. 5 seconds, 10, 15. The ocean didn't move. Neither did the players. 20, 25. Every sailor in CIC knew what came next, could write headlines for decades, or a footnote for tomorrow's brief. 30 seconds. At 31 seconds, the beam cut out. The Levchenko's radar returned to search mode as if nothing had happened. Just enough time to say we could have. Not enough to hand the U.S. Navy legal cause to launch. It was the most dangerous bluff in modern naval history, and the Americans had already called it. 14:32 p.m., July 19, 2025. The sky over the Barents Sea split apart. In just 4 minutes, the USS Gerald R. Ford hurled 48 aircraft into the Arctic air, the largest launch in these waters since the Cold War. Steam hissed. Catapults slammed. The flight deck thundered with movement, yet every step was measured, precise. Yellow shirts carved signals through the haze. Chains rattled loose. Tires screamed against steel. One Hornet shot forward, then another, then another. Growlers followed, wings heavy with pods that could blind an entire fleet. Hawkeyes lifted high, their radars spinning an unseen net that stretched across millions of cubic miles. Each aircraft was more than a machine. Each was a nerve in a larger organism. One mind, one heartbeat, one strike force that moved as a single predator. And then, the Growlers spoke. Their ALQ-249 pods ignited, flooding the spectrum with raw noise. Russian radar feeds fractured instantly. From the Admiral Levchenko to satellite relays over the Kola Peninsula, screens collapsed into static. Contacts blinked, multiplied, vanished. Ghost fighters swarmed the Russian scopes. Real Hornets slipped between them unseen. For the Su-30 pilots, it was chaos. They were already running on fumes, their fuel low, their radars outdated. Now they were blind, out of time, out of options. And then, the ocean itself answered. 14:41 p.m. Black steel rose from the waves. The USS New Hampshire, Virginia-class attack submarine, surfaced like a leviathan just 6.2 nautical miles from the Levchenko. Russian lookouts froze. Their shouts echoed across the deck. Crews scrambled for stations, because they understood what that black silhouette meant. For 9 days, the New Hampshire had stalked them, silent, untouchable. She had slipped beneath sonar nets, dodged anti-submarine helicopters, ghosted past towed arrays. Now she was right there, within kill range. If war had begun, the Levchenko would have lasted no more than 60 seconds. A single torpedo and she'd be gone. Above, the skies mirrored the same imbalance. Super Hornets rolled, climbed, and inverted with violent grace, pulling 9G turns in full view of their adversaries. Calm, controlled, unshaken. The Su-30s tried to respond. They burned too much fuel. Their radars lied to them. Their pilots strained against maneuvers they couldn't match. One Russian pilot broke first. His voice crackled across the radio. Fuel emergency. Then another followed. And another. The Russians weren't just outmatched. They were unraveling. 15:06 p.m. 5 Su-30s peeled away at once. Low, desperate, their tanks nearly dry, they limped toward home. No formation, no order, just survival. The Americans didn't pursue. They didn't fire. They didn't need to, because the battlefield was already theirs. Air, sea, subsurface. Locked down, controlled. 48 combat aircraft. A Skynet woven from Hawkeyes and Growlers. A submarine that could surface in their wake at will. Together, they had turned the Russian task group into prey. Outnumbered, outgunned, outclassed. If you were in Moscow watching those radar tracks vanish, what would you do? Press further or swallow the humiliation? 16:23 p.m. Finally, Moscow spoke. A flat broadcast over the Baltic Fleet Channel. Joint Arctic readiness exercise complete. Units withdrawing per plan. But everyone listening knew it was a lie. It wasn't an exercise. It was a retreat. The Russians had come north to provoke, to test, to intimidate. Instead, they had been cornered, above, below, and across the spectrum, and forced home without firing a shot. The Ford Strike Group never launched a missile, never dropped a torpedo, never squeezed a trigger. And yet, they won. Because dominance doesn't always roar. Sometimes it waits, watches, surrounds, until the enemy realizes there is no move left to make. That day, the Arctic learned a lesson carved into the waves. America doesn't start wars, but if challenged, it will end them, decisively. The standoff over the Barents Sea on July 19, 2025 revealed something few nations dare admit. True dominance doesn't always require fire. The USS Gerald R. Ford Strike Group proved it. 48 aircraft launched in minutes. Virginia-class submarines surfacing like black leviathans. Electronic warfare so precise it erased enemies from their own screens. Together, it created a battlefield invisible to the Russians, yet fully controlled by the Americans. Every sweep of radar, every pulse of sonar, every silent submarine turn, all moved in concert, one orchestra of steel and discipline. For adversaries, the lesson is sharp. Restraint is not weakness. The United States does not need to pull the trigger to demonstrate power. It can impose total control in air, surface, and subsurface domains, and choose not to strike. That choice is power in itself. For the public, it is a reminder. Unseen guardians move across the oceans every day. They watch the choke points, shadow the fleets, and ensure the sea lanes remain free. And for those who might test them, the message is simple. America does not start wars, but if forced, it will end them, decisively. Strength, discipline, readiness.
Those are the weapons that echo louder than any missile.
And on that cold Arctic day, without firing a single shot, the United States Navy made the world remember who rules the water.